My DINK mother. My mother believes in DINK, but she unexpectedly had me. Ever since I can remember, she has repeatedly instilled her DINK philosophy in me. It is a great blessing for mom to have you. Don't expect mom to sacrifice everything for you. I am myself first, and your mom second. I never understood it until I grew up and my old and helpless mother begged me to come home again and again. So I told her, I am myself first, and your daughter second. Welcome to the best stories. Don't forget to like and always love yourself. Now, let's dive into the tale. Chapter 1. When my mother found out she was pregnant with me, she was in the middle of planning a trip around the world with my father. My unexpected arrival crushed her dreams, and she cried bitterly over the lost adventure she had been looking forward to for so long. At first, she decided to have an abortion, but my mother was terrified of the pain. She tried to muster the courage countless times, but in the end, she just couldn't go through with it. My father, ever the loving husband, wrapped her in his arms and comforted her. You're such a sweet soul. If you're too scared of the pain, don't worry about it. We can handle raising a child. Wealth was never an issue for my family. My father is a high-powered executive with an annual salary in the billions, and my mother is a dancer who also runs her own dance studio. They never had to worry about money. Raising a child like me wouldn't be any more difficult than raising a cat, or so they thought. But while my family has 5 cats, they never wanted me. When I was born, my mother couldn't bear to look at me for even a second. Less than a month old, I was already the burden she dreaded. She cried in the hospital room, lamenting how I had changed her life forever and wondering how she would ever cope. She would wake up in the middle of the night, and if she saw me lying in the cradle next to her, she would burst into tears for no apparent reason. My father had no choice but to take me home when I was less than a month old, leaving me in the care of a nanny. At that time, I would only drink breast milk, but when I got home, formula was all I had. I cried so hard that my voice went hoarse, and even the nanny shed tears out of sympathy. She called my mother, begging her to come back and feed me, just until I could adjust. But my mother refused flatly. She had already checked into a postnatal recovery center, determined to let her milk dry up in peace. She insisted that if she came back to breastfeed me, it would delay the process, and the longer her milk stayed, the more painful and inconvenient it would be. Swollen breasts were painful, embarrassing, and they made it impossible to wear her yoga clothes. So, I was left with formula. If I refused to drink it, I'd go hungry until hunger forced me to eat. That was her solution. Chapter 2. Chapter 2. When I turned a month old, my mother finally left the recovery center. She came back home, took one look at me, and immediately began packing her things. The nanny asked her what was wrong. She responded, clearly upset, I don't like children. I'm moving to another house. You'll need to take care of things here. I'll pay you an extra $3,000. We own several houses, so my mother moved to one on the far side of the city, because the farther from me, the better. Naturally, my father followed her, moving in with her like they were newlyweds, completely in love and inseparable, as if I didn't even exist. Once my mother had fully recovered, they picked up their plans for the round-the-world trip. They didn't bother telling anyone where they were going. Meanwhile, I stayed behind, struggling through those difficult first 3 months of life as a newborn, battling constant vomiting and crying fits, with nothing but formula to sustain me. Chapter 3. Once I learned to crawl, I developed a real fondness for powdered milk. It's nutritious, sure, but it would have been even better if my mother had made it herself. But I rarely ever saw her. Sometimes, there'd be a video call from her, where the nanny would excitedly point the camera at me and say, "Sweetie, call mommy." On the other side of the screen, my mother would be eating dessert with a beautiful manor hotel as her backdrop. She'd look at me with a bored expression, and when I couldn't manage to say, "Mommy," she'd quickly excuse herself, saying she had something else to do, and then she'd hang up. The nanny could only sigh. Eventually, I learned not only how to say "mom," but also how to speak in full sentences. Yet, my mother never called me again. I'd ask the nanny in my innocent way, "Where's my mom?" There were plenty of mothers in our neighborhood. They'd push strollers or hold their children's hands, chatting and laughing, stopping to play. But I was always just with Lacey, my nanny. There were other children cared for by nannies too, but every now and then, their moms would show up, taking over for a while. But not my mother. She never appeared, and there was never anyone else who came to take her place. Lacey didn't know how to explain it to me. She'd just say, "Your mom will be back soon. She can't leave her 5 cats at home for too long." So, I waited and waited. Each time my mother returned, it was in a hurry, and she'd leave just as quickly. She was either busy with work or heading abroad, never able to stay longer for me. When I turned 3, my mother came back home for the first time in half a year. But it wasn't for me. It was because one of the cats had died. Chapter 4. A big fat cat called Nancy was dead. Nancy was the cat I hated most because it always bit and scratched me. Once, it even bit my finger hard enough to make it bleed. Lacey was terrified and immediately called my mom on video. My mother's first reaction was, Nancy wouldn't bite. Did the kid hit it? No, some cats just can't be tamed. If they want to bite, they'll bite, Lacey, who grew up in the countryside and knew cats well, replied. My mother was furious. You're the one who's unmanageable. Why do I even pay you so much if you can't take care of a child? For a moment, I thought my mother was worried about me. I quickly waved my hands and said, Mom, I'm fine. Please don't scold Lacey. But my mother ignored me and told Lacey to turn the camera so she could see Nancy. When she finally saw the cat, my mother calmly said, All my cats are vaccinated. She'll be fine. I have a dance competition tomorrow, and her father is abroad on business again. We just don't have time to come home. The implication was clear. They couldn't be bothered with me. Trying to be considerate, I waved my hand again. Mom, don't worry. You don't need to come home. My mother hummed in response and hung up the phone. Lacey had no choice but to take me to get a rabies shot, paying for it out of her own pocket. After the shot, she kept me busy, running, jumping, singing, telling me not to stop. I was exhausted, barely able to catch my breath. I asked Lacey why we had to keep going. She glanced at the injection site and said, People say rabies shots can make you stupid. You need to keep moving, don't just sit still. That made sense to me. I was terrified of becoming stupid and not being able to call my mom anymore. So, I kept moving until I was too tired to take another step. Lacey finally laughed and told me that I was so full of energy, I definitely wouldn't become stupid. We walked home hand in hand, but as we approached the building, we found Nancy's lifeless body on the ground. She had fallen from the balcony and died. Lacey's face turned pale, and she called my mother in a panic. My mother, who had a dance competition the next day, rushed home overnight. She held Nancy's body and cried like her heart was breaking. That was the first time I realized that my mother didn't really like me. She liked her cats. 5. Nancy's death made my mom furious. She fired Lacey. I clung to Lacey, refusing to let her go. At just 5 years old, I learned to lie, saying, Mom, I pushed the cat down, not Lacey. But in truth, Nancy had been playing and accidentally fell out of the balcony. Mom didn't care about my plea. She insisted on firing Lacey. Lacey left with red eyes, hugging and kissing me before wiping her tears and leaving. Mom ignored me, taking Nancy to a beautiful suburban spot to bury her. Afterward, she left without a word, heading back to the city, leaving me alone and confused. I called out for Lacey, but she didn't come back. She had really left. It wasn't until the second day that my mom remembered me. She called a neighbor, asking her to look after me while she found a new nanny. The neighbor, a single mother raising 3 kids, knocked on our door. I was so hungry I had resorted to eating milk powder because I couldn't reach the bottle in the sterilizer. My mouth was covered in milk powder when I opened the door, scaring the single mother. Surprised and concerned, she wiped my mouth and asked if I was feeling unwell. I shook my head and told her I was just hungry. She took me to her small apartment, where her 3 kids crowded around, curiously inspecting me. The oldest, Ben, wore a cheap but clean short-sleeved shirt and had neatly combed hair. He asked in confusion, Your family is rich. Why are you so dirty? I had indeed gotten dirty after being alone for 3 days. Ben, don't talk nonsense, the single mother chided, then gently took me for a bath. She was kind and explained my mother's arrangements, saying, Your mom's too busy, so she asked me to take care of you for a few days. She offered to pay, but I'm embarrassed to accept it. She smiled, adding, You can call me Abby. Your name is Pity, right? When she mentioned my name, she seemed to look at me strangely. I nodded and replied, My mom says I shouldn't have been born, so she named me Pity. In my naivety, I didn't fully grasp the meaning of those words, but Abby's expression darkened, and her brows furrowed. 6. My mom said she'd find a new nanny for me soon, but half a month passed, and no one new came. Abby was already struggling financially since her husband passed away, trying to support 3 kids and an elderly parent. Now, she had to take care of me too, along with feeding the cats. It was overwhelming for her. Luckily, my dad returned from his business trip. He thanked Abby and took me home, but I cried and refused to go. My dad is a man of little patience, except when it comes to my mom. He lost his temper, yelling, Why are you crying? Shut up. Abby's face changed again, and she quickly offered, hey, I'll continue taking care of Pitty until you find a new nanny. My dad, always want to solve problems with money, responded, why don't you just take care of her forever? I'll pay you $20,000 a month. Abby hesitated, but her mother coughed, agreeing that since they already had 3 children, one more wouldn't make a difference. Abby finally agreed. Looking back on this years later, I still find it magical. My biological father casually left me to be raised by someone else. Wasn't he afraid something might happen to me? And Abby, who eventually accepted me, wasn't she afraid of the same? In this unusual handover, a 3-year-old finally found some stability in life. 7. After moving into Abby's house, my life returned to normal. Like other children with a mother, I get up, eat, go to kindergarten, take a nap, and watch TV. On weekends, Abby would take us to cheap amusement parks or to shopping malls to enjoy the air conditioning and watch performances. Sometimes when she was too busy, she would bring me to her side, and we would set up a stall under the night sky and sell scallion pancakes. It will be tiring, but fun. Everything is so beautiful. Sometimes I have the illusion that Abby is my mother. At least, she's my new mother, right? But as a new mother, there are still many things that she cannot solve. When I was in elementary school, Abby's 2 younger children were also in elementary school, and her oldest had moved on to junior high. Abby's life became even more hectic, and her mother's health began to decline. Abby often secretly wiped away tears because she was so tired of taking care of the whole family. I gradually learned to be independent and tried not to bother Abby. She noticed my deliberate independence, and one day after the children were asleep, she came to talk to me. Are you hungry? Abby asked as soon as she saw me. I shook my head, insisting I wasn't hungry, but the loud growl of my stomach betrayed me. It was the weekend, and I'd had so much fun that I hadn't realized how hungry I was. Abby laughed softly. You're only 7 years old, and already you're trying to fool your aunt. I clutched my stomach, determined to convince myself that I wasn't hungry. I didn't want Abby to go out of her way to make me a midnight snack again. She was always worried that I didn't eat enough, and sometimes she would sneak me extra meals late at night. Your father gave me a lot of money, Abby said as she gently patted my head. Even though I'm a little tired, the pressure on my family has eased. You're my lucky star. Do you know that? I looked at her, puzzled. What's a lucky star? You're a lucky star sent by God, Abby explained with a warm smile. You see, after my husband passed away, I had to work from dawn to dusk every day and borrow money just to get by. But after you came, our family situation improved. We've become middle class, and I've even saved up some money. What's middle class? I asked, still not fully understanding. Abby chuckled softly. It means we have meat to eat every day, everyone has nice clothes to wear, and we're all happy. That's the middle class. I thought about it for a moment, then said sadly, I didn't have new clothes before, and I wasn't happy. So I'm not middle class. 8. My family was wealthy. We had multiple houses, villas, and a fancy car with a 3-pointed star logo. But despite all that, I didn't feel like I belonged to the middle class. Abby fell silent, unsure of how to respond. She simply hugged me and went to prepare a midnight snack, just like she always did. This routine went on for so long that I eventually forgot what my parents even looked like. Abby became my world, and my parents seemed to disappear. No, that's not entirely true. My mother did show up once when I was 8 years old. An aunt in the community mentioned that my mother still visited the house frequently, probably to take care of the cats. But she never came to see me, even though I lived right next door. This time, though, she came to see me. I was so excited, trying hard to hold back the tears that welled up in my eyes. My mother looked me over and nodded approvingly. You've grown up. Are you 7 years old now? I'm 8. I corrected her, proud that I was already in the 3rd grade. Oh, she exclaimed, as if realizing it for the first time. You're already this old. Have you grown up? I'm very sensible. The most sensible, I declared, eager for her praise. She smiled and squatted down in front of me. Pitty, I know you've grown up. That's why I came to talk to you. We're having an equal conversation. I didn't understand what she meant and stared at her blankly. The so-called equal attitude, she continued, means that everyone is an independent individual. A mother is a mother, and a daughter is a daughter. You have your life, and I have my pursuits. I still didn't understand. She tried to simplify it. Giving birth to you was a blessing, but I have my own pursuits and ideals, so I won't stay by your side, and I won't give up everything for you. Do you understand, Pitty? I am myself first, and your mom second. I was confused, so I asked simply, "Is Mom too busy to stay with me?" She smiled but didn't answer. She just touched my head and left. As I grew older, I often thought about my mother's words. What did she mean by that? When I entered junior high school, I started to develop my own understanding. Suddenly, it dawned on me. What my mother meant was simple. She didn't love me. She was letting me fend for myself. Sure, she provided financial support, fulfilling her basic obligations. But as for anything else, like maternal love, she wasn't willing to give it to me. Realizing this made me feel cold all over. I sat in silence for a long time. Finally, I decided to find my mother and ask her if that's what she really meant. 9. Not long after, my big brother Ben took me to the city center for a day out. Ben, Abby's eldest son, was already in high school. He had $50 and said he wanted to treat me to KFC to celebrate my entry into junior high school. Taking advantage of the moment, I made a request. I want to go to Melody Dance Studio. Melody Dance Studio was a place I had only heard about from Abby. It was my mother's studio, supposedly the largest in the city, and I had been curious about it ever since Abby mentioned it. Ben, being the kind cousin he was, agreed, and we started looking for the studio. Luckily, we weren't far, and after asking for directions a few times, we found it in an office building. When we reached the 7th floor, my heart started pounding, and my palms were sweaty. The 7th floor was where the studio was located. Ben looked at me curiously and asked, "Why do you want to come here? Do you want to learn how to dance?" I didn't answer him. Instead, I walked to the glass window and peered inside. Finally, I saw her, a graceful woman, dancing alongside a dozen others. Her face was radiant, full of elegance and confidence. She looked so different, so full of life. I couldn't take my eyes off her. I hadn't seen her in person since I was 8. Even though she lived so close, she never visited me. I'd see her sometimes when she came home to check on the cats. She never told me when she was coming, so I'd just watch her secretly as she played with the cats and then left with a smile on her face. But since the cats had all died last year, she had stopped coming altogether. Now, here she was, right in front of me, in her element, moving like a beautiful butterfly, surrounded by elegance and wealth. She loved dancing, loved teaching others, and it was clear that dance was her soul, free, independent, and self-admiring. For reasons I couldn't fully understand, tears started rolling down my cheeks. An indescribable emotion welled up inside me, and soon I was crying uncontrollably. Ben, alarmed, pulled me into a hug, trying to comfort me. Through the glass, my mother finally noticed me. She looked confused, wiped the sweat off her face, and walked out, still as graceful as ever. I lowered my head, wanting to leave, but she stopped me with a scolding. "Why are you here? Do you need money?" I tried to speak, but all that came out were choked sobs. My mother sighed in exasperation and waved me off. "Go, go, go. I'll give you money later." She didn't want her students to see me. My voice was barely a whisper as I finally managed to say, "Mom, I miss you." She seemed even more frustrated and turned away to make a phone call. "Hey, Laozhou, please come and take your daughter home." "I'm too busy." I watched her turn her back to me, and suddenly, I couldn't speak at all. 10. Ben and I walked away in silence, both of us feeling ashamed. Ben kept muttering angrily about my mom, but I had no strength left to respond. I didn't even want to eat KFC anymore. We just went home quietly. After that day, I never went to see my mother again. Even though she lived in the same city and it would only take half an hour to reach her by taxi, I couldn't bring myself to go. 12 bus stops away, and yet she felt like a world apart. In my 3rd year of junior high, my grades soared to the top of the class. It was a huge accomplishment, but it also attracted jealousy. One day, a girl picked a fight with me, and in the heat of the moment, we both ended up slapping each other, leaving us both bleeding. The teacher called my mother, hoping she would come to school to handle the situation. But my mother immediately refused. "You should ask Abby. She's the one who takes care of my daughter." The teacher was insistent. "Abby is not her mother. This could turn into a big issue. I strongly recommend you come." But my mother still refused and asked the teacher to put me on the phone. When I answered, trying to explain what had happened, my mother cut me off with a harsh scolding. "Stop causing trouble. Your father and I are really busy and don't have time to deal with your mess." But she hit me. I cried, feeling the injustice deeply. "Why did she hit you and not someone else? Why are you always causing trouble? You're such a nuisance." And with that, she hung up. My mom wasn't coming. I stood there, head down, unable to say anything. The teacher, seeing this, just shook his head. In the end, he scolded the other girl and made me apologize. We both walked away with bruised egos, and the matter was closed. With tears in my eyes, I silently accepted the unfairness. The other girl, now feeling victorious, sneered at me and went back to class. But it didn't end there. A few of her friends started bullying me too. I didn't dare fight back. I had no one to defend me, no mother to stand up for me anymore. 11. Fortunately, the high school entrance examination will be soon. I did well in the high school entrance exam and was admitted to the best key high school in the city. Because it was far from home, I chose to live in the school dormitory. Abby sent me to school. She had a few white hairs and more wrinkles at the corners of her eyes, but she was very happy and said that I was her proudest child. I was stunned for a moment, then raised my head and smiled. Well, I am your proudest child. My grades have always been among the best, and in the class, there is no bullying, and no one laughs at me because of my parents. I studied hard and fearlessly, performed exceptionally well in the college entrance examination, and was admitted to Harvard. This is a big deal. Our whole family was stunned, and Abby cried with joy, unable to contain her emotions. My elder brother Ben, always the dramatic one, knelt down on one knee in front of me in an exaggerated fashion. "Sister, you are my big sister from now on," he declared with a playful grin. I was also very happy until my mother came back. She is 43 years old, still glamorous, dressed luxuriously, always smells good and has a graceful figure. Abby is also 43 years old, but because of overwork, her hair is gray and her face is covered with wrinkles. Abby seemed a little uncomfortable in front of her mother, as if she considered herself inferior to her mother. My mother smiled and gave Abby a large sum of money on the spot as a reward for her taking good care of me. Without her care, I wouldn't be able to get into a good school. No, you guys have already given her a lot of money. Pity's success in getting the top score in the city exam is the result of her own hard work. Abby quickly refused, and at the same time realized that it was time to say goodbye. She patted my arm and said, "Pity, your mother is back to pick you up, go and call her mother." I stood there without moving, feeling very indifferent. Mom frowned and waved her hand. "Abby, you misunderstood. I'm not here to pick up Pity. You know I'm a workaholic. Her father is now the chairman. How can we have time to take care of her?" Abby was stunned and asked uncertainly, "Pity is an adult and is in college. Why don't you take her back? Isn't my house next door? She's in college now, and she's more independent. She has a house to live in, someone to take care of her, and she's not short of money. Why does she need us?" My mother smiled and shook her head. "She deserves it. Yes, I didn't need her care when I was a child, let alone now that I'm an adult." I said, "I'm not leaving. I'm staying at Abby's house." My mother nodded with relief. "Okay, Mom is relieved." She left with peace of mind. Abby pushed me and asked me to go and see him off. I thought about it and followed silently. When she saw me coming, she waved her hand and said there was no need to see me off. I looked at her and suddenly asked, "What is your DINK philosophy?" 12. In fact, I am old enough to already know what DINK is. If you get married and don't have children, you are a DINK. But I cannot understand its deeper meaning. If a couple decides not to have children, they enjoy life to the fullest, enjoy their freedom, travel around the world, dance, paint, then this is a normal DINK. However, if a couple has children and still enjoys life and freedom to the fullest and does not care about their children, then is this still a normal DINK? My mother frowned and said, "Why are you asking this? Have I ever mentioned DINK to you before?" "You mentioned it. I've heard it many times. When I was little, every time she went home with her dad, she would complain that home was boring to her, especially with a child. This does not conform to her DINK concept and is not the DINK life she dreams of. She kept complaining, DINK, DINK, DINK. I have been a DINK many times. The DINK concept is simple and reasonable. I am myself first, and your mother second." My mother's words are exactly the same as what I said when I was 8 years old. She looked at me without any guilt. "It is a great blessing for me to have you. I gave you life and spent a lot of money to raise you, but I am different from other mothers. I am me first and a mother second." 13. So that's how it is. Or rather, it is indeed the case. I actually understood it a long time ago, but I just wanted to ask again. Why do you want to ask again? Maybe I just won't give up. Now, I've given up. I didn't ask any more questions and went home quietly. Abby was waiting for me, and she was relieved to see that I looked normal. "Let's eat, Pity. Congratulations on your success in the city exam." Abby held my hand, the white hair on the back of her head vaguely visible. When I saw those white hairs, I burst into tears and called out hoarsely, Mom. Abby was startled and turned to look at me in surprise. What? Mom. I raised my voice. Abby blinked, her eyes reddening. But she shook her head vigorously. Pity, don't call me Mom. Your parents will be angry. I don't care if my parents are angry or not. I just want a mother now. I yelled again, Mom. Ben ran out. His face changed. Sis, who are you calling Mom? This is my mom. My mother. I said firmly. Ben was very anxious. No. You? How can this be possible? My mother is not your mother, and I am not your brother. We are not related by blood, understand? Abby burst out laughing when she heard that. Ben blushed and ran away shyly. 14. Abby agreed that I could call her Mom, but I can only do that at home to avoid someone complaining. I was very satisfied, and after the summer vacation, I boarded the high-speed train to the north. During my 4 years in college, I continued to study hard and move forward. I felt a motivation in my heart to change Abby's life. She shouldn't have to suffer. Ben and I both want to change her life. Ben graduated earlier than me. He said his name is not very nice, but I think it is 10,000 times better than Pity. So after Ben graduated, he immediately helped me contact the police station and prepare to change my name. He is now tall and handsome. He joined a top law firm right after graduation. He is talented and has an amazing aura. He also has 2 friends who are officials in his hometown, so it was not difficult for him to help me change my name. He asked me what I wanted to change my name to. I thought about it for a long time and came up with a very uncultured name, Melody. I am the one who should come into this world. Ben almost died of laughter, but as he laughed he felt heartbroken and wanted to hug me, but we have all grown up. He was too embarrassed to hug me, so he scratched his head and said, How about Jewel? A rare and beautiful jade that will last forever. No, I said with disgust. Ben started scratching his head again. Kara? No. I laughed out loud. Ben always wants to give me the name Precious. I am not a person who should not come into this world. I am a baby that everyone loves. But it's really weird. I decided to pick up the name Darcy. Well, I just want to remove the word Pity. 15. After getting a new name, my life took off for the second time. During my 4 years in college, I won numerous awards, became a celebrity on campus, and was even interviewed on a local TV station. After graduation, I continued my graduate studies. It was not until this moment that I realized that my parents had never shown up once in my entire college career. Come to think of it, I've only seen them on video a handful of times in 4 years. Once during the Christmas, they went back home temporarily. Probably because of the scene. They suddenly called me on video and asked me how my university life was going. I said it was fine and then hung up with an excuse. Another time was during New Year's Day, when I was a junior in college and went back to Abby's home to celebrate the new year. My parents were having fun in the snow in the north, and they were so happy that they didn't even come home for the new year. They called again and pointed the camera at a snowman in an open space. Pity, look at the snowman. Your dad and I made it. Haha, isn't it cute? My mother is getting older and seems to have a desire to share, so she took the initiative to share the snowman with me. I looked at the snowman with a blank expression. Abby's family, who remained quiet, with their meals steaming hot. Pity, what's wrong? Are you feeling unwell? My mother asked. I shook my head. It's quite comfortable. Our family is having a reunion dinner. You guys can continue to build snowmen. I won't disturb you. My mother's face changed and my father next to her was about to scold me, but I hung up the video. The last video I made was when I just started my senior year. At that time, my mother was sick and hospitalized, and my father was on a business trip abroad. She was only accompanied by a caregiver, so she suddenly called me on video in the middle of the night. I answered the call with sleepy eyes and saw my mother shifting her body in agony. Oh, it hurts. I'm old and useless. She acted pitifully, hoping that I would ask her what was wrong with her, and even better, go back to take care of her. But I said nothing, just yawned. I'm so sleepy. My mother pursed her lips and hung up the video herself. 16. My graduate school life was going very well. Maybe I suffered too much when I was a child, and God wants to compensate me. I don't have to worry about money either. It's not because my parents always give me money, but because Ben got a promotion and his monthly salary is over $50,000, which is enough for me to support my postgraduate studies. He also often sent money home to improve Abby's living conditions. Our family is getting better step by step. This is also my biggest motivation. After I graduated, I also joined a large company, worked hard day and night, and finally got promoted step by step and gained a firm foothold in the group with abundant talents. Now, my monthly salary is higher than Ben's. Together, We easily make $1 billion a year. On the day I went home for vacation, Ben and I went shopping all over LA. Jewelry, gold, clothes, shoes. I just buy whatever I like, all for my family. Ben's younger brother and sister have also graduated, but they are not doing so well. Fortunately, they are very filial and kind people, so we bought a lot of things for them too. When we got home that day, everyone gathered together and the living room was filled with gifts. Abby couldn't stop crying, which attracted some neighbors to watch. Now, word spread like wildfire, and the entire community knew about it. Everyone said that Pitty had become rich and bought 5 or 6 gold chains for Abby. After dinner, I would go for a walk in the neighborhood, and someone would always greet me, "Pitty, are you home? Did you make a fortune in New York? $1 million annual salary? That's promising." I really didn't know I was so famous in the neighborhood, but I was very happy and responded one by one with great enthusiasm. When I reached the steps at the southeast gate of the community, I suddenly saw a couple coming towards me. Those are my parents. My parents are both over 50 years old. Their steps are a little slower and they have more wrinkles on their faces. Although she is well maintained, she no longer has the vitality and energy she once had. I was in a trance for a moment and asked myself, are they really my parents? My impression of them is still stuck in my childhood. It's like a river that has stopped flowing for decades. The river has long dried up. We have all been moving forward in time for more than 20 years. I lowered my head and deliberately avoided them. They walked up the stairs hand in hand, looking a little tired and lonely, and didn't notice me. I heard my dad complaining, "I wonder if Pitty has come home yet. I haven't been able to contact her for months." Several months? Oh, by the way, I changed my cell phone number and only my family knows my new number. 17. Is she still in graduate school? I wonder how many years she has been studying. My mother took a breath. My dad thought for a moment and said, "She should be graduating soon, right?" "No, she should have graduated a long time ago, right?" "Is she working?" "I don't know. Let's ask Abby later. She knows." My mother had a complicated expression. It happened that a few old ladies were about to leave from the southeast gate. When they saw my parents, they were all surprised and said, "Your daughter made a fortune in New York and bought a living room full of gifts for the Abby family." My parents looked at each other and their faces turned strange. Okay, let's go find her now." They quickened their pace and rushed home. I went around in a circle, deliberately avoiding them, and waited for a long time before going home. Abby's house was open, and it was still bustling inside. When I went in, I saw that my parents were there too. I turned and left immediately. My mother's face changed. "Pitty, why are you leaving?" I didn't move and just stood there. "Pitty, do you have any opinion about us? You finally came back. Why don't you bring us some gifts?" My father always speaks frankly. He is a chairman and is not afraid of embarrassing others with his words. He kept staring at the Abby's presents, the ones I bought. I smiled indifferently and said, "Forget it. I'll buy it next time." "Forgot? Why didn't you forget Abby's gift?" My mother looked unhappy. I thought about it and replied calmly, "I forgot. Didn't you often forget me at home before? I almost starved to death, and you were only thinking about your cat." My mother's pupils shrank, as if someone had strangled her throat, and she became speechless in an instant. Abby and the others looked at each other in silence. My dad slammed the table and said, "Pitty, how dare you talk to your mom like that? Are you rebelling?" Abby was startled and quickly tried to smooth things over. Okay, I've prepared dinner. Everyone wash your hands and eat." "I don't want to eat." My mother gritted her teeth, stood up, and walked away with a look of dismay. My dad is leaving too. I moved aside and made way. Their faces became even colder and they left without looking back. 18. I was not affected by my parents' bad mood. After staying at home for a few days, Ben and I went north to work again. Ben asked me hesitantly, "Have you completely fallen out with your parents? Do you want to have some more communication?" "We haven't communicated for more than 20 years. There's no need to communicate anymore," I said without hesitation. Ben said no more. Abby, on the other hand, often calls to ask about my well-being and mentions my parents from time to time. I exposed her directly. "Did they ask you to plead for me?" Abby gave an awkward smile and said, "Darcy, your parents have finally realized their mistakes in raising you. They actually regret it now." Sigh. Abby doesn't understand a lot of things, but her family has always been harmonious and loving. So I don't blame her for not being able to empathize with me. Still, I held firm in my opinion. I told her, they might be aware of their role as parents, but they still won't admit their mistakes. Instead, they want you to play the middleman. Is that what being a parent is? Abby was at a loss for words and never brought up my parents again. Without her as a go-between, my parents finally took the initiative. On my birthday, my mother sent me a bracelet, ordered a cake, and had it delivered. She left a message on the cake's postcard. "Happy birthday, Pity. Mom has always remembered your birthday but was too busy before." Too busy again. No other words. I shared the cake with my colleagues, and as for the bracelet, I took it to a gold shop to have it recycled. A few days later, my father suddenly called and berated me. "You ungrateful brat. Your mom sent you gifts and waited every day for your reply, but you ignored her. Are you trying to drive her to an early grave?" I calmly replied, "Why should I bother? She ignored me for years. Do you think you're all high and mighty now? We have more money than we can spend, so your little bit is nothing." My father had always been in a high position, and no one dared to challenge him. So when he got angry, it was always thunderous. I listened to the storm but remained unmoved. As he grew angrier, I simply blocked him. After that, my parents didn't contact me for 2 months. Later, Abby told me my father had suddenly developed Alzheimer's. No one could have predicted it. My dad had become a fool, sitting on the balcony every day, staring blankly at the sky. This time, I went back. 19. I stepped into the home I hadn't seen in ages. All the cats were gone, not a trace of them left. My dad was sitting in his pajamas on a lounge chair on the balcony, rocking side to side, looking confused and occasionally making strange noises. My mother welcomed me into the house, wearing an apron with water stains on her hands. I paused for a moment, taking her in. She was so unfamiliar. "Pity, come in quickly. Mom will cook for you." She was so enthusiastic. The wrinkles around her eyes deepened with her smile. I wasn't hungry and pointed to my father. "What's wrong with him?" "When you get older, unexpected things happen. He fainted while walking, and when he woke up, he was like this. It's fate." My mother shook her head bitterly. "Your father and I have had a good life. No regrets, alas." My mother was always so open-minded, perhaps because of everything she'd experienced in her youth. She traveled far and wide, saw the sun, the moon, the rivers, and the seas. She even went sightseeing in the Arctic and watched penguins in Antarctica. Or she danced in the studio, taking part in various eye-catching events. She spent all her energy chasing freedom and the life she wanted. She is first a woman, and then a mother. It's a great line, one that can serve as a life motto for any woman or mother. Every woman is herself first, and a mother second. But for my mother, she was herself first, second, and last. She was never really my mother. She never followed the DINK, dual income, no kids, lifestyle she mentioned. She just used it as an excuse to be selfish. I shook my head gently and said, "Since Dad's fine and you seem to have things under control, I'll be going. Eat before you leave." "Wait a minute, I'll go cook." My mother was flustered and panicked. She shut the door and hurried to the kitchen. She had never been one to cook, and after fumbling for a long time, she finally managed a plate of burnt scrambled eggs with tomatoes and some beef with green peppers. The smell was awful. She grew more anxious, sweating while she cooked, muttering, "How could this happen?" I clearly learned how. I watched her flustered back in silence for a long time before finally saying, "Forget it. I won't be coming back." She trembled and froze in place. I opened the door and left. 20. A year later, I was successful in my career and my annual salary reached $2 million. I'm very busy at work, but I go home often. Not back to his own home, but back to Abby S. home. Every time I go back, there's a stir in the neighborhood because I always bring back a lot of gifts. And Abby S. family has become a real middle-class family. She bought a new house of nearly 200 square meters, which is big enough for us to live in together. My own home is closed all year round. I heard that my mother lives in there and rarely comes out. She looks very lifeless. I went home for the holidays again and my mother finally came out. She handed me a file bag and said it was all the family assets and was given to me. I took it without hesitation. Her fingers paused, then let go reluctantly. Seeing that I accepted it, she immediately asked for credit. "Pity, are you coming home for dinner tonight?" Mom's cooking skills have improved a lot. I noticed that while she was speaking, she was glancing at the briefcase out of the corner of her eye. She was reluctant to part with her assets. I handed it back and said, "No, I'm too busy. I have to go back to New York soon." Actually, there is no need to reply. I am already a member of management and I am on annual leave. My mother was startled. "You don't want it? There are at least 70 or 80 million in assets here." I shook my head and said no. She took it back hesitantly, her eyes flickering. "Then Mom will help you put it away first. By the way, Mom will clean up your bedroom for you. Come back and live here in the future, and don't bother you all the time, Abby. She's my mother. What's the problem? I responded casually. My mother trembled and her eyes turned red instantly. I ignored it and walked into Abby's house. 21. 2 days later, my mother went out for a trip. She deliberately told the ladies in the community that she had no children and didn't see the point in leaving behind so much money. She planned to spend all her money and then die comfortably. This incident became a hot topic and many people guessed the whole story. Is Pity stupid? What's wrong with her recognizing her mother? There's so much inheritance. Her mother was so mad that she deliberately spent money. It must be millions, right? There's talk of it everywhere. Ben also found me and asked me what was going on. I shrugged. It's nothing. We just need to live our lives well. Ben felt a little embarrassed when he heard this. That's a bit ambiguous. Have you finally decided to marry me? Ben proposed to me last year. This guy is very secretive. He has been secretly in love with me for many years. He is like a 1,000-year-old turtle and has been holding it in for a long time. I didn't agree on the spot, but my heart beat faster. In fact, I am a person who lacks love, which has also caused me to lose the ability to love. I'm not sure if I love Ben. Maybe I just think of him as a brother? But after that, my heart would skip a beat every time I saw him. I realized that I did love him. There is no passionate lingering, only plain attachment. But no matter which one it is love. I decided to marry him. 22. On my wedding day, my mother called me via video from France. She was very calm and showed me the pigeons in Paris. She said there were a lot of pigeons, flying very high and freely. There was an underlying message in her words, but I didn't bother to figure it out. I simply replied, "You can fly as high and free as a dove. It doesn't concern me." She hung up the video. Not long after, she came back. I heard that she fell while abroad and broke her pelvis. She was hospitalized for a long time before being moved back to LA. This time, she couldn't walk anymore. Since there was no one to take care of her, Abby sent my mother to the most luxurious nursing home in the city without telling me. I only found out about it half a year later. It all started late one night when my mother suddenly called me and cried in a terrified and suppressed voice, "Pity, please save me. I was beaten by the nurse again." I frowned in confusion. What nurse? I'm in a nursing home. Even though I've paid so much money, they still look down on me and always bully me. Pity, Mom was wrong. Can you come and see Mom? Bring Ben with you, and bring more relatives. Don't come alone. She was helpless to the extreme. I understand what she means. She needs me to give her some support. In nursing homes, those most at risk of being bullied are often the ones who are alone. Since she has no one to rely on, she becomes more vulnerable to mistreatment. Even the most formal nursing homes cannot rule out the possibility that some low-quality caregivers have this bad mentality. My mother was unlucky and apparently met a bad caregiver. So it was useless for her to pay a lot of money. She needed her children to support her and tell the caregiver not to bully her. I didn't want to go. I'm very busy at work and can't leave. I'll ask Ben to bring someone to deal with this matter. You can just stay here and relax. I already have a lot of heart. As long as Ben brings someone there and the caregiver is fired, the nursing home will still be a good place. It doesn't matter whether I go or not. My mother understood this, but she suddenly broke down. You're always so busy, can't you come and see me? Her words left me stunned. When did I start picking up on her catchphrase, I'm busy, I'm too busy, I'm so busy? The truth is, I'm not that busy. I clutched my phone in silence and finally shook my head. I really am busy. Mom collapsed again. You're lying. Do you hate me so much? I was wrong. I shouldn't have always used the excuse of being busy to ignore you. Pity, please forgive me. I'll give you all the money in the house. Can you come and take it? I'm so scared. The nurse hit me. She was really scared. It was exactly like when I was in the 3rd year of junior high school and was slapped by my classmates. Why did he hit you and not others? Did you cause trouble? I suddenly said this without even realizing it. Maybe I lost my soul, and my soul drifted back to my 3rd year in junior high school. That year I asked my mother to come to school to help me. My mother asked me, "Why do others beat you? Can you stop getting into trouble all the time?" As the memories came to me, my mother cried at the top of her lungs on the other end of the phone. She must have remembered that incident and felt too ashamed to ask me to come back. I didn't go to see her, Ben did. He was very concerned about it and brought a dozen of his friends to the nursing home and made a big scene, forcing the director to fire the caregiver on the spot. From then on, no one dared to bully my mother. She can now live in peace in a nursing home, but she will never be able to ask me to look at her. She transferred her assets to me this time, and she was willing to do so. She was hinting to me that she had given me everything and hoped that I would forgive her. But I still didn't go to see her, even just a glance. As for the assets, I'll keep them and she's welcome to take them back at any time. Let's live our lives in peace. 23. The next year, my bestie had a baby, and the little one was absolutely adorable. On a whim, I asked Ben if we should have children ourselves. Ben barely looked up from his work and said, "Look at you. Having a baby sounds painful. If you're not interested, we don't have to." It was clear he hadn't given the idea much thought. I am currently in the rising stage of my career and have unlimited energy, so naturally I want to go further. I said, "No, I will follow my mom's example and be a dink." Ben nodded and said yes. But not long after, I became pregnant. I was dumbfounded, and Ben was also scratching his head in confusion. Outrageous. How can you get pregnant with this? Who knows? I am in a dilemma. Do I want children? That night I dreamed about things that happened in the past. My birth, my full month, the dry milk powder I ate, my hand scratched by a cat, the slap in the face by my classmates. Everything seemed to happen again yesterday. The unforgettable pain instantly woke me up in the middle of the night. I was gasping for breath, my fingers were shaking, and it took me a long time to calm down. 20. A year later, I was successful in my career and my annual salary reached $2 million. I'm very busy at work, but I go home often. Not back to his own home, but back to Abby's home. Every time I go back, there's a stir in the neighborhood because I always bring back a lot of gifts. And Abby's family has become a real middle-class family. She bought a new house of nearly 200 square meters, which is big enough for us to live in together. My own home is closed all year round. I heard that my mother lives in there and rarely comes out. She looks very lifeless. I went home for the holidays again and my mother finally came out. She handed me a file bag and said it was all the family assets and was given to me. I took it without hesitation. Her fingers paused, then let go reluctantly. Seeing that I accepted it, she immediately asked for credit. "Pity, are you coming home for dinner tonight?" Mom's cooking skills have improved a lot. I noticed that while she was speaking, she was glancing at the briefcase out of the corner of her eye. She was reluctant to part with her assets. I handed it back and said, "No, I'm too busy. I have to go back to New York soon." Actually, there is no need to reply. I am already a member of management and I am on annual leave. My mother was startled. "You don't want it? There are at least 70 or 80 million in assets here." I shook my head and said no. She took it back hesitantly, her eyes flickering. "Then Mom will help you put it away first. By the way, Mom will clean up your bedroom for you. Come back and live here in the future, and don't bother you all the time, Abby." She's my mother. What's the problem? I responded casually. My mother trembled and her eyes turned red instantly. I ignored it and walked into Abby's house. 21. 2 days later, my mother went out for a trip. She deliberately told the ladies in the community that she had no children and didn't see the point in leaving behind so much money. She planned to spend all her money and then die comfortably. This incident became a hot topic and many people guessed the whole story. Is Pity stupid? What's wrong with her recognizing her mother? There's so much inheritance. Her mother was so mad that she deliberately spent money. It must be millions, right? There's talk of it everywhere. Ben also found me and asked me what was going on. I shrugged. It's nothing. We just need to live our lives well. Ben felt a little embarrassed when he heard this. That's a bit ambiguous. Have you finally decided to marry me? Ben proposed to me last year. This guy is very secretive. He has been secretly in love with me for many years. He is like a 1,000-year-old turtle and has been holding it in for a long time. I didn't agree on the spot, but my heart beat faster. In fact, I am a person who lacks love, which has also caused me to lose the ability to love. I'm not sure if I love Ben. Maybe I just think of him as a brother? But after that, my heart would skip a beat every time I saw him. I realized that I did love him. There is no passionate lingering, only plain attachment. But no matter which one it is love. I decided to marry him. 22. On my wedding day, my mother called me via video from France. She was very calm and showed me the pigeons in Paris. She said there were a lot of pigeons, flying very high and freely. There was an underlying message in her words, but I didn't bother to figure it out. I simply replied, "You can fly as high and free as a dove. It doesn't concern me." She hung up the video. Not long after, she came back. I heard that she fell while abroad and broke her pelvis. She was hospitalized for a long time before being moved back to LA. This time, she couldn't walk anymore. Since there was no one to take care of her, Abby sent my mother to the most luxurious nursing home in the city without telling me. I only found out about it half a year later. It all started late one night when my mother suddenly called me and cried in a terrified and suppressed voice, "Pity, please save me. I was beaten by the nurse again." I frowned in confusion. "What nurse?" "I'm in a nursing home. Even though I've paid so much money, they still look down on me and always bully me." "Pity, Mom was wrong. Can you come and see Mom? Bring Ben with you, and bring more relatives. Don't come alone." She was helpless to the extreme. I understand what she means. She needs me to give her some support. In nursing homes, those most at risk of being bullied are often the ones who are alone. Since she has no one to rely on, she becomes more vulnerable to mistreatment. Even the most formal nursing homes cannot rule out the possibility that some low-quality caregivers have this bad mentality. My mother was unlucky and apparently met a bad caregiver, so it was useless for her to pay a lot of money. She needed her children to support her and tell the caregiver not to bully her. I didn't want to go. "I'm very busy at work and can't leave. I'll ask Ben to bring someone to deal with this matter. You can just stay here and relax. I already have a lot of heart." As long as Ben brings someone there and the caregiver is fired, the nursing home will still be a good place. It doesn't matter whether I go or not. My mother understood this, but she suddenly broke down. "You're always so busy, can't you come and see me?" Her words left me stunned. When did I start picking up on her catchphrase, "I'm busy, I'm too busy, I'm so busy"? The truth is, I'm not that busy. I clutched my phone in silence and finally shook my head. "I really am busy." Mom collapsed again. "You're lying. Do you hate me so much?" I was wrong. I shouldn't have always used the excuse of being busy to ignore you. "Pity, please forgive me. I'll give you all the money in the house. Can you come and take it?" "I'm so scared." The nurse hit me. She was really scared. It was exactly like when I was in the 3rd year of junior high school and was slapped by my classmates. "Why did he hit you and not others? Did you cause trouble?" I suddenly said this without even realizing it. Maybe I lost my soul, and my soul drifted back to my 3rd year in junior high school. That year I asked my mother to come to school to help me. My mother asked me, "Why do others beat you? Can you stop getting into trouble all the time?" As the memories came to me, my mother cried at the top of her lungs on the other end of the phone. She must have remembered that incident and felt too ashamed to ask me to come back. I didn't go to see her, Ben did. He was very concerned about it and brought a dozen of his friends to the nursing home and made a big scene, forcing the director to fire the caregiver on the spot. From then on, no one dared to bully my mother. She can now live in peace in a nursing home, but she will never be able to ask me to look at her. She transferred her assets to me this time, and she was willing to do so. She was hinting to me that she had given me everything and hoped that I would forgive her. But I still didn't go to see her, even just a glance. As for the assets, I'll keep them, and she's welcome to take them back at any time. Let's live our lives in peace. 23. The next year, my bestie had a baby, and the little one was absolutely adorable. On a whim, I asked Ben if we should have children ourselves. Ben barely looked up from his work and said, "Look at you. Having a baby sounds painful. If you're not interested, we don't have to." It was clear he hadn't given the idea much thought. I am currently in the rising stage of my career and have unlimited energy, so naturally I want to go further. I said, "No, I will follow my mom's example and be a DINK." Ben nodded and said yes. But not long after, I became pregnant. I was dumbfounded, and Ben was also scratching his head in confusion. "Outrageous. How can you get pregnant with this?" "Who knows? I am in a dilemma. Do I want children?" That night I dreamed about things that happened in the past. My birth, my full month, the dry milk powder I ate, my hand scratched by a cat, the slap in the face by my classmates. Everything seemed to happen again yesterday. The unforgettable pain instantly woke me up in the middle of the night. I was gasping for breath, my fingers were shaking, and it took me a long time to calm down.